What is up, YouTube? Today we're going to be doing a guide on Path of Exile with tips and tricks about going through the whole quest line when you make a new toon or character. And you're just trying to get through it, get to the end, start doing the mapping and having fun, but you're not trying to constantly be dying every 2 seconds because you didn't really plan it out and waste a lot of time. So, to get into it, the first thing is pretty much choosing how you want your leveling experience to be. So by that I mean, there's pretty much 3 ways to go about it. One is you just rush the hell out of everything. You're running to the end, to the next objective. You're skipping the bonus objectives and side quests, and you're doing them all later once you're done with the entire campaign. Another way is more of a mixed, where like, yeah, you're trying to get everything done, but maybe you're hitting some side quests if they happen to be near you, if they're out of the way, you don't bother saving for later, things like that. And then the other is just very slow. You don't care about when you start doing maps. You're just killing mobs and having fun. Obviously, they're all, whatever one you want to do. The most important thing is that you're having fun while you're playing the game, because if you're not having fun, then what the heck are you doing? It's a video game. But I try to kind of go over more of the mixed view, where we're still trying to get through everything as quick as we can and get to the mapping and really get to the meat and potatoes of the game. But at the same time, you can enjoy the leveling process if you're just trucking through destroying mobs. It just makes it more enjoyable. So I'm going to go over a couple of general guidelines just for the entire process. First one was choose the mindset that we just talked about. Pretty much just pick from the gate, okay, I'm going to do a mixed, or I'm just going to go balls to the wall. The next one is have a build and play in a skill tree. So this, not really a big surprise, but the skill tree in Path of Exile is absolutely ridiculous, and everyone knows this. If you find a build online, whether you're Googling it, GUI builds, or right on the forums, or you know what skill you want to use and you're going from there, whatever the case is, at the very least, plan out your skill tree. There's a program called Path of Building. It's amazing. Everyone would highly recommend doing that first. Path of Exile does have their own skill tree. That's a website I have open now. You can use to plan it out that way. But just make sure you have a plan for your skill tree. So this way, as you're leveling and you're putting your points in, you don't end up with points everywhere going in all different directions. Just do it, and make sure while you're doing it you pick up some life nodes. No matter what build you're doing, you want to get life, or if it's an energy shield build, you get a good amount of energy shield nodes. Just, you don't want to go around getting one shot. One of the fastest things you can do to waste time is die. So, try to not die. Another quick general tip is waypoints. So, it sounds really stupid, but there's just a quick little thing you can do. So, you're in the zone, right? You're doing your thing, and then you go out, you go to the next zone, and you think, oh crap, there's a waypoint here, that's awesome. And you're like, wait, did I get a waypoint in that last zone? I don't remember. So you just hit U, and just look at the zone behind you. If it's got that black circle, then there was no waypoint, you're fine. If it has this blue dot, but a very tiny one in the center, instead of one that's filling the circle like this, there was a waypoint there and you missed it. So just make sure you get them. It's going to save you a lot of headache down the road. That's about it. Next thing is try to limit the amount of trading you do with PoE Trade or Path's trade website now that's running like doo-doo at the moment. Main things are pretty much your armor. Get yourself a nice 5-link armor. It doesn't have to be build specific or anything, just a random rare with 5-link sockets in it. Make sure it's not corrupted, not mirrored. This way you can mess with the colors and get the ones you want. It's going to take a little bit to get that, so don't be in a rush. You'll probably be getting through like level 30, 40 plus before you actually should bother at all. And then even then, a lot of them have high level requirements or stat requirements, so just make sure you don't go trying to trade for one that you can't actually use anyway. And make sure the armor types match the socket you're going for. For example, like this is evasion rating and energy shield, so it's going to very easily roll green and blue sockets. If I need to get red sockets, it would be a little trickier, or if I had an armor that only had armor on it, no evasion, no energy, it's going to emphasize red sockets very heavily, and it would make the rolls I'm trying to get here impossible. Not near impossible. So just keep an eye on that. But that's really it, is the 5-link armors, which after like a couple days to a week of a league being out, are already really cheap. They're usually an alchemy orb. It's a joke. And then unique weapons. If you're doing any type of a melee build, It's especially beneficial to get unique weapons, because they'll usually give you a giant burst of damage that'll get you through another 10, 15-ish levels, something like that, based on how good it is. And those are only an alch each. Just whatever you do, make sure you're not spending more than an alch. That's really the bottom line. These Trials of Ascendancy. So you do want to make sure that you're solving the trials whenever you have the chance. Certain areas. When you walk into certain areas, you'll notice on the right side of your screen it's got the green text that says solve the trial in this area. Do that, because since you're in the area questing anyway, you're going to be revealing a lot of the map. So if you notice the next like orange door symbol on your map that lets you go to the next area, but you're like, oh crap, I haven't done the trial yet in this area, get it done while you're there. Get it out of the way. This way you don't have to backtrack. You already have a lot of the map revealed, so it's easier to find. Just get it out of the way. And that's only for the first toon of the season. Once you complete all the trials on any toon, for the rest of the season, all the toons you make have them unlocked for good, so you don't have to worry about it much more after that. When you actually do your Ascendancy, the Ascendancy points that you get will give you a huge boost in damage and clearing and everything, so it's definitely really nice and they're very inviting to get. But don't necessarily just run into it the instant that you unlock it. If you unlock the Ascendancy, but you notice that as you're doing the quest for whatever reason, it doesn't feel super smooth, you're not destroying mobs, you have a little bit of fights going on, you're taking a lot of damage, whatever the case is, just keep questing and figure out what you gotta do to get your gear situated. Maybe you just need to be picking up more stuff and pick up like a blue item that has a bunch of life on it to replace the rare item that you put on that has absolutely no stat that helps you. Whatever the case is, once you feel comfortable and you're questing again, you're like, alright, now I'm crushing stuff, I'm cruising, let me go back, get that trial out of the way, and then that'll let you crush stuff even further. Because you really don't need them at all to get through the entire storyline, they just help. Another thing is, while you're questing, try to make sure your main skill, whatever you're using to attack and do damage, has area of effect. So by that I mean lesser multiple projectiles, GMP, Pierce, increase the area of effect gem. There was melee splash. I don't know if you need that anymore with Legion, but just devote one of the sockets in your main attack skill, to be some type of area of effect to help you get through the quest quicker. So even though that gem's going to hurt your boss fights a little, and while you're questing you're not really going to be trying to carry around an extra gem to switch out on boss fights and things like that, but the amount of time you save going through the rest of the game and the extra killing you do to help keep your level up to where you need it to be is going to make up for the extra 10 seconds it takes you to kill like the 2 or 3 bosses of each act. So it's definitely worth getting. It's going to feel smoother. Just keep it in mind. Another thing's movement speed boots. When you first start off the game, you don't really have many great ways to get move speed boots. You don't have any Scrolls of Wisdom ID stuff. You don't have alts or anything to try and craft them. If you talk to over here, you can check to see. Just every time you're in town, maybe just skim through the boots he has. No movement speed. Alright, whatever. Go back to questing, right? Pick up every blue pair of boots you see, even if they don't help you at all. Maybe they're energy shield boots and you don't use energy shield, but you pick them up because they're blue anyway. You'll most likely end up finding a pair of boots that have, like 15% movement speed or something. And then once you get rolling with those for a little while, you'll eventually start finding more and more rare boots, and then the rares have a decent chance of having it too, and you'll be able to hold yourself over. I had really crappy boots on this character for the majority of his leveling. They had like 20 max life on them and 25% movement speed, and that was pretty much it. I think 10% of a resist. But I just used them because they had 25 movement speed, and it worked out pretty well. He was cruising. So it's more something to just keep in mind for the early levels, and then after that it works itself out. League objectives is another good topic. So each league they'll have some type of objective that's constantly coming out and smacking you in the face. Right now it's Legion. So for example, there's these pillars that just spawn all over the place. You click them, there's a whole interaction, it's a whole thing. Every league that they do, whatever objective it is going to happen many, many times while you're questing, whether you like it or not. And 9 times out of 10, that objective is actually going to help you. It's going to be giving you really good XP. It's going to be giving you decent drops and more chances to keep your gear up in check because of those drops. So I usually say just do it. If you skip normal champs and elites while you're questing because you get far ahead in levels from doing those objectives, that's great. You get more gear and more for your time out of those objectives than you do out of just killing every single champ and elite you see. If for whatever reason you end up noticing your level is, I usually take about 5 levels as a good rule of thumb. If you notice that whatever up here the monster level is 5 levels lower than yours, then you got carried away, which is fine. But just focus more on getting to the next objective, getting to the next act, and really just avoid everything you see. At 5 levels, I would usually start avoiding even League mechanics, like the Legion thing I was talking about, but typically I don't really get to 5. It'll be like 4 levels, and then I kind of pick up the pace, start dodging some stuff, and it ends up just working itself out. So another thing is with the passive tree, keep in mind that you do get refund points. So in my opinion, the best thing you can possibly use these refund points for is while you're leveling and gearing up, getting these types of notes. Not these exact ones, but they have them everywhere on the tree. So my character ends up getting a lot of intelligence because of just how the skill tree works that he gets. But then the dexterity and the strength fall off. So then certain pieces of armor you pick up might roll beautifully. Great stats, life, and all res on some armor. A weapon that's a huge damage increase, but you're missing just a little bit of dex or just a little bit of strength. Take a look at your tree. Maybe you have one of these guys nearby. You end up with, I had 20 refund points when I finished the last act on this guy. I think you might be able to get a little more, I forget, but you definitely get at least 20 if you do all the side quests. So you can take 2 out or 3 out, whatever you have to do. Take out the last 3 things that you just did with the refund passives, right? And then put those towards getting some of these bigger keystone nodes. And then that's going to be beneficial in the long run because once you're finally done leveling and you have your gear all situated and you don't need those stats anymore, you can just refund them again, get them back, and then put the points where you want. So very good usage of it. Other than that, I would say, just keep in mind whatever build path you are trying to follow on the tree and stick to it. So on the topic of side quests and bonus objectives, that kind of thing, if you're going through your questing and you're getting through the act and you see either an objective you have to take or pick up or a side area, usually it'll be like, one of those little orange door symbols that leads to an area that there's a quest there, but it's not necessarily needed to get through the act. If you're nearby and you have good movement speed and everything situated, like whatever your movement skill is that you use, so like for me it's mainly shield charge, right? I started worrying more about going out and getting those side objectives and things done because it's very quick between your Quicksilver Flask, between the move skills. The biggest thing is that if it shows itself to you, by all means go for it, but if not, don't. Just keep pushing through. If you want to spend the extra time to go hunt for it, get out of the way, and not worry about it later, that's fine too. It's really pretty much your choice on that, but if you're not sure, that would be the rule of thumb, is that if you never see it, don't worry about it, go back to it later. If it shows itself up, go for it. Okay, so for the topic of loot filters, pretty much everyone knows what loot filter is. If you don't, it's something that makes it so that the bajillion items don't show up. You only see ones that you're more worried about. So typically what I end up doing is I take one of the never sinks loot filters and I go through the customization. I tweak it out to make it really just show me what I want. But for the sake of starting off in a new league, every time I start a new character in the league, pretty much just because I'm in a rush to get through and get to the mapping and everything, I don't deal with the loot filter. I actually just switch it to default, the in-game default loot filter, and I use that. And that'll still show you everything you want. It'll show you a little more than you want, but at the same time, that can be helpful because it's going to show you a bunch of white items, which if you end up killing one of those blue essence event monsters that are like trapped in the crystals, and they drop an essence, maybe you end up seeing like a white shield that could be very helpful. Slap an essence on it. Oh, surprise, surprise, it rolled all the stats you want on it. That's awesome. You just got yourself an upgrade because you picked up a white because of essence. So I like using the default, and it still highlights like 6 socket items to vendor for jeweler's orbs and things like that. But if you wanted to, you can just use one of the like never sinks lower tier ones, and it'll still show you things based on the level of the area you're in, so you don't have to worry about it just hiding everything. So that's pretty nice. He put a lot of work into that. He made it so that it is actually leveling friendly, but that's kind of just up to you, however you want to do it. You're not doing it wrong if you use the default loot filter or if you don't. And the loot filter ties into picking things up that you need. So what I mean by that is don't pick up extra stuff. So if I'm making a spellcaster, right, someone that uses spell damage and cast spells, I don't give a damn about a sword. I see a sword drop on the ground, I don't care, I ignore it. Whether it's rare, I mean, if it's unique, I'll pick it up anyway, because you can vendor uniques and get good alchemy materials. But I'm pretty much only picking up items that could potentially be good for my character. Now the first, I want to say about 20-ish levels, I think by about 30 is where I stopped picking up as many blues as I was. But up till about that point, you don't find a crazy ton of rares, so you can end up picking up a blue weapon or gloves or any piece of gear that's actually amazing. And one really good example of that is this ring I picked up. So this thing is only required level 28, and I think I got it around 28, maybe like 30 at most. But it rolled amazing. These are like the best rolls you can get on a level 28 magic ring. I ended up using this ring despite the countless other rare rings that you find all the way until now. Like I started mapping with that ring, and it's still serving me well. So don't underestimate the blues. You can get a weapon that just happens to roll flat fizz and percent fizz damage, and it's going to be better than every single rare weapon you find, just because it happened to do that. But at the same time, don't get carried away and pick up every single blue you see, because you're going to waste all your wisdom scrolls IDing them, you're going to waste all your time too. So just, if you're really hurting on a piece of gear, keep that in mind. Otherwise, don't worry about the blues too much. Okay, so as you're picking stuff up, get a dump tab set up, right? It doesn't need to be like a fat quad tab. Just any regular tab in your stash will do fine. But have a tab that you're just dumping items in. So what you'll be dumping in is you pick up a couple rares for whatever reason, you ID them. It's a 4-link gloves that you don't need right now, but you might want to hold on to in case you end up needing those links. Whatever the case is, just have a tab for dumping everything. You replace a piece of gear, but you don't want to vendor it. You think maybe someone would buy it for a chaos or two. Just throw it in the tab. Don't deal with pricing it or trying to figure out if it's worth anything. You pick up unique that you haven't seen before. It's new, and you're like, oh, is this worth anything? I don't know. Throw it in the tab. Figure it out later. I had a tab that was just completely full of random garbage. And then once I finished, Katava, the last boss, in the quest, I said, oh god, now let me go back and figure out what's going on with that tab. Turns out one of the random items in there that I picked up while I was leveling, I said, this could be really good. It was worth like 18 chaos, which is hilarious for something you pick up while you're not even at mapping yet. But I didn't even look through anything on that list until I was done questing. So have a good dump tab. It definitely helps save time. If you stop to think about any item at all, don't. Stop thinking, put it in the tab, think about it later, get back to questing. Side note on that too, keep every unique ring you find. Once you have a full inventory's worth of unique rings, you sell them to the vendor. I think it's 60 total, whatever the amount is. You sell it to a vendor, you get lore weave. It's unique armor, it's worth a bunch of chaos just because it's amazing. So just random side note, regardless of how bad it is, just keep all your unique rings. Give them their own tab or whatever. And then a last quick note on just picking up random garbage. Any 6-socket item, and these don't drop till I want to say like Act 7-ish is when you really start seeing them. I think they can drop earlier, but any item that has 6 sockets, regardless of what colors, regardless if they're linked or not, just 6 holes on it, you can sell to a vendor and get 7 jeweler's orbs. Now this is huge for a lot of reasons. One of them is that if you just pick them all up, like granted they take up a big amount of space in your inventory, but you don't have to ID them. You're not thinking about if they're good or not. You just know, this is going right to the vendor, I'm getting my jeweler's orbs. So it's quick, and those orbs add up really, really, really fast. And then once you have a good amount of them, you have the option of you can use trading with other people to trade them, turn them into chaos. Or one quick thing you can do is you can actually go to a vendor and turn them directly into fusing orbs, which I'm sure need no explanation. Fusing orbs are love. Fusing orbs are life. And they also suck because they never give you 6 links. But right there. So it's only 4 orbs. So with that 7, you get that. You get what I'm getting at here. Okay, so for the scrolls, especially when you're first leveling and going through the initial burst of quests, you're going to have no scrolls of wisdom, not enough portal scrolls, whatever, so you're picking up every single one you can find. As you start to get more and more, you start to wonder, okay, at one point do I stop picking these things up and just keep breezing through the quests? The whetstones and the armor scraps, these 2 things here are how I get around picking up the scrolls. So what happens is, at any vendor, you can buy portal scrolls using wisdom scrolls. Not any vendor, but vendors everywhere. Right here. 3 scrolls of wisdom for 1 portal scroll, right? If you trade a portal scroll in the sell window, it'll just give you a 1-for-1 trade back to scrolls of wisdom. The armor scraps and the whetstones, I believe they're an even 2-for-1 trade. But you could just sell those right to the vendor. And think about it this way, if you pick up 1 armor scrap or whetstone, it's the same as going out of your way to pick up 2 scrolls of wisdom. So if you ignore all wisdom and portal scrolls but pick up every whetstone and armor scrap, it's actually more efficient in terms of time you waste picking stuff up. But a good rule of thumb while you're going through that first good chunk of quests, the first early levels, would be to pick them all up. But you don't gotta run out of your way. So if I'm running around, I'm questing over here, and I notice a scroll drops all the way up here, or a whetstone armor scrap, anything drops all the way up there, I don't worry about it. I just keep it pushing. But then when they're dropping in my immediate vicinity, I pick them all up, whether it's a scroll or a stone. And it sounds like kind of a dumb thing to consider or waste time thinking about, but honestly it helps a lot in the long run, because then you can keep IDing stuff, you can portal whenever you want, and it just keeps everything running more smooth. You're not constantly like, I'm out. So it's very helpful. I would definitely just keep it in mind. So skill gems. Another thing to think about is the links on the item, like these gloves I have on, are absolute garbage in every way. But they have 4 links, and they're the colors I needed to get my movement skill, shield charge set up, so that I could use that to fly around the screen and do my questing and everything a lot quicker, right? So even though that roll of those gloves is so bad, they dropped on the ground with 4 link sockets, and they were an armor base, so it was very easy to get 2 red, 2 green with a couple chromes, and I said, alright, screw it. Keep in mind the skills that you're going to want when you're planning out your build, and notice that certain classes can only get certain skills in certain places. So that was a long-winded way of saying that, like, I'm a shadow, right? My character is the class shadow. Oh, my ascendancy looks disgusting. Anyway, my class is a shadow, right? So, like, Path of Exile shield charge, right? And if you scroll down, whoa, here, it shows me that, like, as a shadow, I'm only going to be able to get it with the Act 3 or the Act 6 tricks. Act 3 is the library. I don't have it identified because I didn't care. I still don't. But when you go up here to Imperial Gardens, if you kind of head like up and to the left as much as you can until you're in a corner and just look around, you'll see there's a new area called Library. I think it's Library. But you go in there, and then you find this ghostly bro named Seosa, and he'll give you a quest to run around, find some scraps of paper, you give them back to him, they're pages to a book, and then he'll be able to sell you any gem you want, which is nice. That can be very helpful, but it's a lot of time wasted out of your questing and progression. So it becomes a question, how bad do you want that gem? Whereas, oh my, what? That's on standard. Holy mama, I should play standard. What the fuck tab is this? So what I usually end up doing is just trucking through not having those skills that we were talking that you don't have yet until Act 6, right? Because then Act 6, right in town, without going out of your way, without having to carry around the orbs you need for him and count it out, Lily Roth, she'll just sell you anything, because she is just the best. And she cool like that. And it's worth noting that whatever skill you're ultimately going to be using, once you're all leveled up and everything, might not be the same as the one you're using while you're leveling. So for example, a lot of skills have a required level of 30 or 34, and that could be the skill that you want to use ultimately throughout your mapping and adventures and whatever. But you're not, what do you do until 34? You don't just run around punching enemies, so you figure out a good skill that works with your build. So, for example, if the skill that you're ultimately trying to use involves slapping stuff with a hammer, find another skill that works really well at slapping stuff with a hammer. Like Glacial Smash, you use until you can get Sunder, or just something like that. So, even for in that scenario, it may or may not be worth going out of your way for the Act 3 quest, because whatever skill you've been using so far is still going to be totally fine to get you into Act 6, but it's really just judgment call on that. Alright, so the last note, overall summary of your gems and your links, is try to figure out whichever ones you can get to help emphasizing on obviously your main attack skill and things that are going to make it do more damage and clear quicker. Like AoE, stuff like that. A movement around skill, whether it be shield charge, whirling blades, leap slam, some type of a dash, lightning warp, whatever you're ultimately going to be using to get around the map and travel fast. And then there's also a cast when damage taken setup, which if you're following a build, it'll always have some type of setup like this, but it's a gem you get. You first get it in Act 4. I mean, the level 1 level requirement on it is 38, so it's obviously not a very early gem, but you get it around when you're going to start to need it. So what you do with that is you just link that with a couple other gems. You keep their level low enough so that it procs it. If you read through the actual description of it, all that would make more sense as to what you're trying to do. But you make it so that you take a certain amount of damage, and your character starts casting these other skills as you take that damage. You take the damage, you cast one, you take the damage, cast another. It goes through a cycle of them. But this is going to do things like it brings down my golem for me, it gives me a nice defense boost, and it'll curse enemies so that they hit me a lot less. So I take a chunk of damage, and then they stop doing as much damage, so I don't take another chunk. There's a lot of different ways to set this up and what you want it to do, but just keep in mind that once you can get that gem, it's usually worth getting some type of a link together for it right away, just to help let you barrel through the rest of the acts and quests with just a little more carefree. Less worrying, less backtracking to try and not die, more just cruising. With the gear, so general thing to know with the gear is vendor recipes. And when I say vendor recipes, there's a lot of things you can sell to a vendor where if the right items are sold, it'll actually result in something else. So for example, if you sell any helmet, magic blue helmet to a vendor along with an orb of alteration and a life flask with a surface blah blah blah, it'll give you a helmet with +1 level mini gem in exchange for those. Instead of just showing you like the normal transmutation orbs and crap that you get back, it'll show you a new item, which is really cool. But there's a lot of vendor recipes, and this will be in the description with all the other links. A lot of vendor recipes that are really good to know and can do some cool stuff, but for the sake of leveling, you're trucking through things, there's really only a few that you actually care about. This is interesting. The movement speed boots, where you do Quicksilver, white boots, and augment orb. The problem is by the time you have extra Quicksilver flasks, you're already going to have movement speed boots, and then you can upgrade those boots with another 5%, but it's pretty much the same boat. So as much as that's really good to know, and it sounds like, oh man, that would be very helpful, it's not realistically helpful because you're going to be busy crushing through everything, getting leveled anyway. Still kind of cool to know, but the one that is important would be pretty much just this one. This is the only one I ever actually care about, and it's when you're using some type of a melee, not just melee, any type of character that does damage with a weapon, right? So someone that's not casting spells. You put a weapon, any weapon at all, a blue or rare rustic sash, that belt that you drops all the time, and you can just pick up a white one and use an orb of transmute on it. Don't bother wasting an alch. You can, but don't. And just use an orb of transmute to make it blue, and just one whetstone. And when you sell those to the vendor, it's going to give you the same weapon, but with a range of increased physical damage, right? So that range does vary, and it gives you some details here based on the item level of the sash. So pretty much the level of the monster that it dropped off of. And if it's blue or yellow, right? So using it with a yellow, a rare, does help. It's not worth wasting an alchemy orb on though, but if you happen to find a rare rustic sash and you're like, this is garbage, don't just vendor it, put it in your dump tab, use it for later when you want to upgrade the weapon. You can do it with spell damage too. The problem is spell damage doesn't actually do crap for casters when they're leveling. Random fun fact, if you're doing any spell type damage, so this wand right here, the blue text that says adds 27 to 44 cold damage to spells, I actually made this thing while I was leveling. You can see at 45, I think I made it around like 47, 48 or something. But I was noticing that I wasn't really getting any good wands with that type of an added damage to spells mod. And the ones that did, it was really, really low, and I was like, oh, I really want a stronger weapon. And I still can't. I have found weapons since, and they just don't give me as much damage. This one's actually really good. Adding flat damage to spells is very noticeably more effective than just percentage spell damage. For whatever math and reason, that's just a thing. So if you're doing a spell type character, keep that in mind, and that's also why we don't care about this, because this isn't what we want. We actually want damage to spell. And the last note with the gear for that is going to be the crafting bench. Don't forget that you have the crafting bench, but don't get carried away with it. So like even for example this helm, like it has a crap ton of life, and it's got a res, and I was able to put a double res on. I was like, this is really nice, but I knew in the back of my mind that as soon as I start doing mapping and I start getting some currency together, I can very, very easily replace this helm for barely any cost. So I didn't want to overcommit. So for example, if I do a double resist on it, it costs 3 chaos to do. That's a lot to waste on a helm that you're just using for leveling. So I actually went down, I didn't even do the 2 because it costs an alch. Which at the time I didn't have many of, and I was like, let me just save it. I just went down to the one that just cost a couple crappy transmutes. So these were the options at the time. Between the 10 to 12 and the 13 to 16, you are not going to feel or notice the difference at all, but you will notice if you do that on a bunch of pieces of gear, the heavier one, and then all of a sudden you have no alchemy orbs. So just something to keep in mind. If you do use the crafting bench, that's fine, but expand the option you're going to use and make sure there's not a very cheap version that you could be using to get you through the leveling and not waste your currency. Okay, the very last thing I want to talk about is the flasks. So these are important for so many reasons. If you're familiar with common builds and endgame setups, every spot in this flask belt is filled with some type of unique flask, usually maybe 1 or 2 non-unique ones that have a specific purpose and do amazing things. For leveling, you're obviously not going to have any of those. So you're going to be using mostly like life and mana flasks. So I've been able to curve out most of mine, so this isn't a great example. But when I'm really trying to truck through leveling, I'll usually have 2 Quicksilvers. The one that you get off one of the first couple quests that you do, they let you pick a Quicksilver as an option. Or another one that I either find or just get from another quest later on. I put both of those in there just to get you through those darn acts as quick as you can. You gotta move fast. And then for the life and mana flask, because for a while it's only going to be life and manas here. You won't have cool ones to pick from. You keep an eye on the mods that they have, but don't go crazy alt spamming to try and get them to do certain things that you want to do. There is also tricks with the Mangery where you can actually put immunities on them, like this Mangery thing here, and you can add, if it has an open suffix, you can add like immunity to bleeding, like this thing right here. Again, if it has an open suffix, but don't worry about it too much. Honestly, they're really not that important. Maybe when you're in like the last 2 or 3 acts, and you notice you just randomly died because you were bleeding and none of your flasks have bleeding immunity, maybe you say, crap, just pick one that has a decent prefix, or use a few alteration orbs just to get one that only has a prefix on it. And you can just hold Alt to see like prefix modifier, suffix modifier. Get one that doesn't have a suffix. go to the main tree and you could pick it from the list of available options to add suffix, put the flask in there, boom, get it done. But the main thing I wanted to talk about with the flasks is the offense and defensive ones. So I'm going to start off with the defense because it's much less flattering. There's really one, the bath salts right here. This thing is, the numbers aren't very big and it doesn't look super crazy, but that 15% physical damage reduction is actually huge for survivability. So if you want just a little something to help keep you alive, I would definitely recommend checking that guy out. There are other ones with evasion rating. There's a granite one that gives you armor, but those are more build specific. If you have a build that's stacking armor or evasion rating for whatever reason, those could end up panning out more than the bath salts. But the bath salts are very generic. No matter what build you're using, it's good defensiveness. So just keep in mind it could be good to have, especially if after you get through the first couple acts, you start to notice that you really only need 1 life, 1 mana potion, and then you have 3 other spots on your belt that you can use or whatever. And then maybe if you're using 2 movement speed flasks, you really only have 1 open spot, but then you start to say, okay, do I want defense or offense? Now, the offense has so much going on with it. So as long as your build can crit, because there's builds that cannot crit, or that can but have no investment into critical damage, but so many builds involve critting one way or another. The Diamond Flask is absolutely busted. It is so good. So just keep that in mind, that flask is busted, and it's very good. That being said, another really good go-to damage flask is actually the Silver Flask. Why do I not? I have an open spot on mine, which is really silly of me. Yeah, that's fine. But the Silver Flask gives you Onslaught when you use it for the, like this one says last 5 seconds, right? Onslaught is movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed. So you're running faster, which is, the whole point is you're trying to get through these acts. You're attacking and casting faster, which helps you get through the acts faster and kill stuff. And it's just amazing. For leveling, it's one of the best offensive flasks you can have because it just gives you everything you're trying to accomplish in one flask. It's so good. So if you end up pairing these two things together, you're just a wrecking ball. You're flying through everything, even if your gear isn't that great. So very good thing to note about that. There is sulfur, which sounds like it's great because right on the text says 40% increased damage. So while it's active, 40% increased damage, but that 40% doesn't actually outweigh these two bad boys because of the way crit works. Now, if your build doesn't do any crit, you have a silver on already, and you do really want to fill in a little more damage in that because you don't need tankiness. You're just running through destroying everything. Keep it in mind, it is good to have sulfur, nothing wrong with that. The last thing I wanted to make note of with the flask, without going into crazy details on what rolls you want for which flask specifically, is to just keep an eye on the rolls that you do get. If you see magic flasks that are like Eternal or Hollowed or whatever flask tier you're up to in your questing, pick them up and just waste a scroll of wisdom on them because you never know. Like this one that I have on right now, this was just picked up on the ground. I didn't use the main tree to get it. I didn't do anything crazy. I just found it like this. And it ends up being amazing. The instant recovery part, though, you want to be careful on. Instant recovery is kind of a late game thing. It's not necessarily as good when you're leveling because so like this is bleeding immunity, right? But it only removes it on use. There is no during flask effect because the flask effect is instant and then that's it. There's no duration to it. So that's something where, like, if you have something like this where this thing lasts longer and the whole time the flask is up, I'm immune to freeze and chill effects, right? So with instant recovery, right, this one is required level 60. This one's required level 65. Neither of them have any quality or anything. They both have the same reduced amount, but Divine gives me more. The reason being is because it recovers the life over 7 seconds, whereas this one recovers it over 4 seconds. So mathematically, if it wasn't an instant recovery, the Eternal would still give me more health per use than the Divine would. But since they're an instant recovery, the duration doesn't actually matter, and it ends up turning out that since this one's built around a low duration, being instant is less beneficial than this one being instant. The only reason I'm using the Eternal is because it has bleed removal. I just want something to remove bleeds. I honestly don't even really use it that much, but it's really just there for bleed removal. But you get the point. If you do notice you're looking between two different instant flasks, just keep in mind to check the number. And that is it. Okay, so I know this was a little bit long-winded and dragged out, so sorry about that, but I did want to try and cover as much ground as I could. Obviously, if you have any questions or thoughts or anything you want to add, feel free to post them up in the comments. I'll check them and, chime in. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out with the general leveling process and getting into those maps and having fun doing the 8 million different things you start doing once you get into the mapping in the endgame. Alright, and that's everything. Take care.